Hi, everybody, and welcome to A Beautiful Culture. I'm your host, Pepper Persley. As we continue our Black History Month edition, I'm super excited to talk with Judge Nandi Campbell, progressive judge in New Orleans that's got some great stories to share. All right, let's see how Nandi's doing. Hi, Judge Campbell. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Pepper. How are you?
I'm great. I'm excited to be talking with you.
I'm excited too. Let's get going.
All right, tell us about your first item, please.
So my first item is a school picture from Uhuru Sasa Shule. That was the first African-American private school started in New York City. And it was started by my father, G2 Wayusi. And in this picture, in the back row to the right, you will see me standing with my hands crossed. We were the original Wakanda kids. This was called Angalia, which means fold your hands at attention. And the school foundation was based in African-American cultures. We learned primarily our history here in the country, and also learned about some of our role models or heroes as African-Americans. We also learned about our history, our African history. And for the most part, we all had African names. That's how I got my name, Nandi, which means a woman of high esteem. Nandi was Queen Nandi, the mother of Shaka Zulu, the Zulu tribe in South Africa. So the Uhuru Sasa Shule was really instrumental in kind of allowing me to understand my foundation. Most young African-American kids don't understand that they are descendants from kings and queens of Africa. And so that is why that picture is important to me. And it's important to this day because I think it's important that kids understand that we are descendants of greatness.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing. All right, could you expand a little bit about your father and the impact he had while he was alive?
Absolutely. My father was an educator in New York, and that's why he decided to open this private school. He felt that the curriculum or the agenda of schools needed to focus more on the history of African Americans in this country and before we came to this country. My father also owned a health food store. He was really committed to the health and the education of his community. He was born and raised in Brooklyn. He is a what I like to call true OG Brooklyn head. And that might be a little too much for you, Pepper, because you're young. But for people like me, OG Brooklyn head means that he was born and raised in Brooklyn. He really cared about the culture of Brooklyn, and he spent his entire life in Brooklyn and working towards education and the betterment of the community in Brooklyn.
Yeah. All right, that's an awesome story, and it's always cool for me to hear people who have connections with their dads, because my dad is really important to me too.
That's awesome.
All right, so thinking about Black History Month, what would you like the students watching this to know about your family's legacy?
I think it's important, especially as it relates to my family and what I got out of being part of this great family, is that it's okay to be who you are. Your skin is beautiful, your nose is beautiful, your hair is beautiful. We are, once again, I'm going to tell you, we're descendants of kings and queens. We are royalty. And so if you are ever feeling that there is something wrong with you and your skin, I tell you to sit up straight. And acknowledge your history in this world, and that is of royalty, and be grateful to the blood that runs in your veins. Stand up straight, kings and queens. The second piece that I wanted to talk about, Peppa, is the Entrepreneurial Memorabilia piece. I think I gave you two pieces, I believe. There's one flyer that talks about my hair braiding business. And then the second one talks about my bus trip to Great Adventure.
All right, so let's just start generally with talk about why you chose both of these to share today and what they meant to your journey specifically.
Okay, that's great. So my parents, they were altogether there was 10 of us. And so my parents were really huge on finding your independence. And so when you turn 14, my father would take us down and get our working papers. And then basically they would buy your essential needs, your coat, your shoes, your uniform for school. But if you wanted any extra things like jewelry or nice clothes or fancy sneakers, you would have to buy it for yourself. And so I decided early on that I like making money and I like nice things. Back then, a cool pair of sneakers cost $50. I'm almost sure that they cost about $150, $200 now. But because I like nice things, I automatically decided I'm going to have to make money. And I was a little headstrong, so I didn't really like working for other people. So I decided I was going to work for myself. And so that is what kind of incentivized me finding ways to make money.
All right, so tell us a little bit more specifically about the hair braiding and bus ride flyers and how those early experiences with work contribute to who you are today.
Okay, so we had a family friend, Tulani. She was the premier hair braider in New York when hair braiding became really popular. And she came to my parents and asked, could she train me and my sister how to braid so we could help her in her business. And so we braided for her for a little bit. I remember one time she took us to New Jersey. And at the time, Whitney Houston was a backup singer for Kashif. And we braided her hair. She was not the Whitney Houston back then, but she was a backup singer. And so we braided different people's hair and we made money. At some point, I thought I was good enough where I wanted to go out on my own. And so I went out on my own. And what you see of that flyer is my mom, she took my name and she took the name and she created a flyer using the first letters of my name. And so I was in business for a couple of years. I went to your house, I braided your hair. I was able to make some extra money on the side. And was hugely popular for a little bit because this was the beginning of the braid stage in New York City.
All right, it's really cool to be a part of something like that, right?
It was fun. So the bus rides came about. We lived in New York and Great Adventures. I'm sure you know about Great Adventures. It was an amusement park and it was huge and it was in New Jersey. So it's really hard for kids who lived in the city to go out to New Jersey for Great Adventures. And so what I would do is rent a bus. I'm doing this at the age of 14 and 15. I'm so happy now that I think back at it that I was big for my age, because I'm sure these business people were not supposed to be renting a bus to a 15-year-old and a 16-year-old. And so I would rent these buses and then sell tickets to my neighborhood friends. And we would go to New Jersey for the day to go to Great Adventures. And so I would get a free seat on the bus, of course. I would sell the ticket enough that I would go for free. And then I would get some extra money to go into my pocket. So the third set of things are connected to my educational journey.
All right, so first off, you got the cap and gown that you shared with us that has an inscription on it from 1985. So tell us more about that and what you learned during that time in your life.
Awesome. Thanks for mentioning 1985, Pepper. You're officially calling me old. That is the cap from my junior high school graduation. And what's significant about that is that is my last graduation, the last time I walked down a hall for graduation before my law school graduation. I went to Satellite 4 Junior High School. I was part of the first graduating class of the junior high school for gifted children. We had a program for dance, for acting and singing. I was a dancer back then, or I was pretending to be a dancer back then. We were the first graduating class. I had the privilege of being in class with Taj Johnson. She's now one of the members of SWV, Tamara. And also Emmanuel Lewis was in our class. And the interesting part about that is that when Emmanuel Lewis was in our class, he was actually on the TV show Webster. Y'all are probably all too young to remember this. And he was really, really short. And because I was the tallest person in school, the principal would make me kind of escort him from class to class, sort of like a quasi bodyguard. And so we were the first graduating class. I used to be a dancer. I enjoyed it for a little bit. But if you remember, when we talked about my entrepreneur streak, I did not continue down the dance road because I couldn't make any money.
All right, there's money shouldn't run again. All right, so you also chose to share your GED diploma. So would you be willing to share with us what this means to you in your journey? I'm wondering if you had to overcome anything when you were young.
I had to overcome a huge period from the time I graduated from junior high school and after leaving junior high school and going into high school. I went through this period of what I like to call my knucklehead period. That's what I tell people. I call that phase of my life the knucklehead period, where I succumb to peer pressure. I succumbed to kind of this feeling that I was not good enough. And so I kind of acted out and fought a lot and instigated a lot of fights. I ended up dropping out of high school because I didn't like class. I didn't like who I was as a person. And so it was a period of time where I really doubted who I was and what my contribution to this world was going to be. I got arrested when I was 15 years old and permanently dropped out of high school because I felt like I just didn't have space. I didn't see a clear path to where I belong. And once I kind of started coming out of what I call my knucklehead period, my father told me, he said, "Nandi, you either have to go back to school or get your GED." And I thought at the time when he told me this, he thought I was going to fail the GED test and I would have to go back to school. And so I started studying and I went to get my GED. And that's why that's important to me. I always talk to kids on a regular basis and I explain to them that there is not a perfect formula for success, right? And so for me, that GED represents being able to get back up, right? I stumbled. I had this period where I decided that I am not worthy to be on this world and be in this world, and I just did absolutely nothing. And so for me, that GED symbolized coming out of this knucklehead period. One of my most important diplomas.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. All right, and lastly, we have your commencement itinerary from Georgia Law School. So tell us a bit about how it felt to graduate from law school and what it took for you to achieve that.
Pepper, to this day, I'm still shocked that I graduated from law school. I'm still like, oh my God. This is amazing because I didn't graduate from college. I decided to finish my college credit when I decided to go to law school. I went to law school when I was 33 years old. I was not a traditional student prior to going to law school. Going to law school was the first time. So in 2005, the last time I was a traditional student was the 1985 when I graduated from junior high school. So it was mind-blowing. One, I moved out of Brooklyn and moved to Georgia. And if anybody have moved from New York to the South, they understand that that is a huge blow, right? Because Brooklyn is just Brooklyn. It's the best place in the world. We'll get to the new best place later on. So it was really hard to, one, go to law school when I was 33. That was hard. I was old. I was a little crusty and rusty. Two, it was hard to go to law school in a new environment. Now I'm living in the South. And so for me, I had to keep my eye on the prize, right? It wasn't necessarily about being a lawyer, but for me, it was about being a public defender. And I knew that if I didn't get through school, I couldn't do that. And so I'm still blown away that they gave me a cap and gown and they let me graduate in 2008.
Yeah, and now you're here. Amazing journey.
So the next set of items have to do with my practice. I finally got out of law school and took a bar, and they made me a lawyer, Pepper.
All right, and that's a huge achievement. And you shared several photos from your time as a criminal defense attorney in New Orleans. So just share with us why you chose to go into criminal defense.
So originally, when I went to law school, I wanted to be a public defender. The goal was to go to law school to become a public defender. And by now, you know that I'm a bit of a rebel, right? There's just kind of no straight path with Nandi Campbell. So I come to New Orleans. They offered me a job to become a public defender in New Orleans. Here in New Orleans, they are revamping the public defender's office after Katrina. And they're like, we need somebody to come down and take on the system. And who better to do it than Nandi Campbell? So I packed my bags and I head to New Orleans to become a public defender. So I was a public defender for a year. And in the public defender's office, we had some internal issues. I'm going to leave it like that. And so I spent 1 year as a public defender before I decided to open my own firm. I knew for me, I was going to continue down the path to be a criminal defense attorney, right? Because I was passionate about defending people and their rights. So it was just kind of natural for me to stay in New Orleans and stay as a criminal defense attorney.
All right. So what are some of your highlights and defining moments from your time as a criminal defense attorney?
So first, I think that to understand the criminal defense world, you have to understand that, criminal defense attorneys get kind of a bad rap. It's kind of like, oh, they defend the bad people. And so I really took on this persona that I am not defending bad people. I am defending the Constitution. So I'm 6'2". It's a mostly male-dominated world. I structured my practice to defend the individuals that needed it most. So I had mostly a lot of murder cases, a lot of high-profile cases. I went to trial a lot. As you can see, I still sort of have my Brooklyn accent, and so that helped. I tell people I was really passionate about my work, and I was passionate about my clients, and I was passionate about defending individuals. So some of the highlights of my work is kind of like going to trial on cases that I was supposed to lose. Like I had an individual who was charged and he was innocent, and he had just graduated from high school when they arrested him right after graduation. And in the middle of representing him, his father passed away. And so it was really personal. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. We knew he was innocent, and everybody turned against him. And so for me, the highlight and why this case was so special to me was because he wasn't supposed to win. The system was supposed to gobble him up. And I was able to bring him home. He couldn't get his father back, but he got his freedom back. And so I think those are the cases that made me realize that I'm doing something good, that I am making sure that innocent people walk out the door, and that is my job as a criminal defense attorney. That was my job as a criminal.
Yeah, that's really powerful. All right, and last but not least, definitely want to touch on how you recently ran a very successful campaign for judge and now are serving on the bench. Can you share? Yeah, very exciting. Can you share a little bit about the historic nature of your campaign and how you prepared for it?
Yeah, so it's so interesting. When I moved to New Orleans, people were like, oh, you're from New York. You're not going to be able to be successful here. But the theme of this conversation, if, people who are listening, I hope they come away with, like, don't allow people to decide what the formula is, right? Create your own formula, create your own journey, your own mission. So I'm sitting at home and, I've been trying a lot of cases and I have to think about the next step. And for me, the next step was getting on the bench and getting on the bench to ensure that we have a balanced bench, right? Because we don't want to live in a society where all of the judges are all former prosecutors, right? Or all of the judges are all former criminal defense attorneys. We want a diverse bench, right? We want to make sure that the bench reflects the community and reflects individuals who are practicing. And so I decided to run for judge. And what made it kind of weird is I made the decision before the pandemic. And so I was all gung-ho and like, yes, as you can see, I'm a talker and I'm an extrovert. So I'm like, let me out, let me talk to the people, let me knock on some doors. And then the pandemic hit and it was like, stay out of the people's faces, don't be knocking on no doors. And just stay behind a computer screen. And so the race was historic for a few reasons. One was, I ran during the pandemic. That was pretty hard. I had to become a Zoom person. Two, the energy that people had for my candidacy was really surprising. I won by, I think, like 75%. I might be exaggerating, but that's okay. 75%, AKA I beat his butt.
That's the important part, you know.
And what it touched on was that, you know, people were really excited about the candidacy because they were really connected to the work, and I had spent a lot of time working in the community and making connections out of the legal realm. And another thing is I had the good fortune of having Brooklyn on my side. I had Georgia on my side because remember I went to law school in Georgia. And then I had my home base. New Orleans is my home. This is where I've decided to settle and decide to live the second half of my life. And that combination of people who have loved me through this journey allowed me to get 75%.
Yeah. All right, that's awesome. And you mentioned reaching out to the community. So like in context of your family's history, how does it feel to be a judge?
So I still kind of pinch myself, you know, Pepper. We occasionally I go, you know, when you are a reformed knucklehead, you know, you have to kind of stay grounded, right? It's important. It's important that your journey stays in front of you. So I one of the things during my campaign that made me sad was that my parents weren't alive to observe the journey. You know, they were both really proud of me because they both were there cheering me on during my knucklehead period. And so every day I'm reminded of kind of people who stood in my corner and continued to cheer for me, even though I wasn't doing things that should have been garnering support. So my family are the backbones. I don't have any kids. I have a cat. I want to shout out my cat, Adama. My cat was just superb during this campaign. But I have a lot of nieces and nephews, and I have a lot of siblings, and I have a lot of cousins. And so we're a really tight-knit family. And there was never, growing up, there was never this emphasis of being like making a lot of money. It's always an emphasis on just being great. Right? My father used to say something, if you want to be a garbage man, just be the best garbage man you could be, right? If you want to be a teacher, just be the best. So the emphasis was on being the best you could be and giving back to the community. And so I'm sure this is important. I tell people, I don't always wear my robe on the bench, and people sometimes think that the robe is what the job is about. And I want to stay grounded, and I want to stay grounded in what the mission is for me as a judge. And sometimes I don't want anything to separate that from the community and from the people.
Absolutely. I love that it's important to you to not only be good at your job, but also to understand that like it's important to be there for your community. It's
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. And the last question I want to ask you is what you would like to leave the students with as far as your journey from Brooklyn to the bench.
I come back to this formula, right? So your parents and the teachers, they act like there's this kind of steps you have to take. And I want you to know that you don't have to get bogged down in this master formula. Go to school, get a job, do this, do that. What's important is that you are passionate about what you do, right? And if you hear that and be passionate about what you do, I could become a rapper and my mother could pay my rent until I'm successful. That is not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that find what you love and then find a way to make your way in this world doing what you love. That comes with a lot of responsibility. I challenge you to be independent. I remember my mother used to say to me, don't use my phone, get your own phone. So once again, at 14, I remember signing up and having a phone installed in my room and putting a lock on it and charging my siblings 25 cents to use my phone. And so find your path, find your passion. Don't buy into this cookie cutter model of what it means to be successful, and spread your wings and be independent, because sky is the limit. You could go from a GED to being a judge.
All right, there you have it, everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. You're so inspiring.
I appreciate you, Pepper.